Our Lady of the Flowers by Genet. Page 190. With Gogi, Divine was very quickly all at sea. He played with her like a cat with a mouse. He was ferocious. As she lies with her cheek on his black chest, her wig is on firmly, Divine thinks about that tongue of his, which is so strong while hers is so soft. Everything about Divine is soft. Softness or firmness is only a matter of tissues, in which the blood is more or less abundant. And Divine is not anemic. Divine is she who is soft. That is, whose character is soft, whose cheeks are soft, whose tongue is soft, whose tool is supple. With Gorgi, all is hard. Divine is amazed that there can be any relationship among these various soft things, since hardness is equivalent to virility. If Gorgi had only one hard thing, and since it is a matter of tissue, the explanation eludes Divine, who has stopped thinking anything except, I'm the quite soft. So, Gorgi lived in the garret, flying over the rows of graves, the column of tombs. He brought his linen, guitar, and saxophone. He would spend hours playing homely melodies from memory. At the window, the cypresses were attentive. Divine felt no special tenderness toward him. She prepared his tea without love. But as her savings were running out, she went back to working the streets, and that kept her from being bored. She would sing. To her lips came unformed melodies in which tenderness blended with pompousness, as in primitive songs which are the only kind that can stir emotion, as do certain orisons and psalms, as do sober and solemn attitudes dictated by a code of primitive liturgy from which pure and blasphemy laughter is banished, although they are still all soiled with the desires of the divinities, blood, fear, love. Darling used to drink inexpensive Pernots, but Gorgi drinks cocktails composed of costly liquors. On the other hand, he eats little. One morning, it might have been 8 o'clock, Our Lady knocked at the door of the garret. Divine was curled up in the shadow, as fragrant perhaps as a savanna, of the Negro who was sleeping candidly on his back. The knocking awoke her. We know that for some time she had been wearing pajamas at night. Gorgi continued napping. She crawled over his hot, naked belly, hitting against his moist but firm thighs, as she climbed over him and asked, Who is it? It's me. But who? Oh, shit. Don't you recognize me? Let me in, Divine. She opened the door. The odor, even more than the sight of the Negro, informed Our Lady. What a stink! You got a tenant? Not bad. Say, I've got to get some sleep. I'm pooped. Got room for me? Gorgi had awakened. He was embarrassed at finding himself with a hard-on, the kind one has in the morning. He was naturally modest, but the whites had taught him immodesty, and in his zeal to be like them, he outdid them. Fearing lest his gesture seem ridiculous, he did not draw back the covers. He simply offered his hand to Our Lady, whom he did not know. Divine introduced them. Would you like a cup of tea? All right. Our Lady was sitting on the bed. He was getting used to the odor. While Divine prepared the tea, he unlaced his shoes. The laces were knotted. One might think that he put his shoes on and took them off without any light. He took off his jacket and tossed it on the rug. The water was about to boil. He tried to take off his shoes and socks with the same movement, for his feet were sweating and he was afraid they might smell in the room. He didn't quite manage it, but his feet didn't smell. He refrained from glancing at the Negro, and he thought, Am I going to have to snooze next to Snowball? I hope he's going to beat it. Divine was not very sure about Gorgi. She did not know whether or not he was one of the many stool pigeons of the vice squad. She did not question Our Lady. All in all, Our Lady was his usual self, Neither his eyes nor the corners of his mouth were tired. Only his hair was a little mussed. A few strands over his eyes. All the same, a bit of a hangover look. He was waiting on the edge of the bed with his elbows on his knees and was scratching his head. "Your water cooking?" "Yes, it's boiling." On the little electric stove, the water was boiling away. Divine poured it over the tea. She prepared 3 cups. Gorgi had sat up. He was being gradually impregnated with objects and beings, and first of all with himself. He felt himself being. He emitted a few timid ideas. Heat, an unfamiliar fellow. I got a hard-on. Tea, spots on his nails. The face of the American girl who did not want to shake hands with one of his friends. 10 after 8. He did not remember Divine's having spoken to him about this unfamiliar fellow. Whenever she introduces him, Divine says, "a friend," for the murderer has strongly advised her never to call him Our Lady of the Flowers in front of a stranger. As things turn out, this has no importance. Gorgi looks at him again. He sees his slightly turned profile and the back of his head. It's the very same head that's pinned to the wall with a safety pin, but he looks better in the flesh. And Our Lady, turning slightly toward him, says, "Say, pal, gonna make room for me? I didn't sleep a wink all night." "Oh, go right ahead, my boy. I'm getting up." We know that Our Lady never excused himself. It seemed not that everything was due him, but that everything was bound to happen, and happen in due course. Nothing was addressed to him, no special attention, no mark of esteem, that in short everything occurred according to an order with only one possibility. "Say, Divine, will you hand me my shirt?" said the Negro. "Wait, you're going to have tea." Divine handed 1 cup to him and 1 to Our Lady. So once again begins a 3-cornered life in the garret which looks over the dead, the cut flowers, the drunken gravediggers, the sly ghosts torn by the sun. Ghosts are composed of neither smoke nor opaque or translucent fluid. They are as clear as air. We pass through them during the day, particularly during the day. Sometimes they are outlined in pen strokes or on our features, on one of our legs, crossing their thighs on ours, in one of our gestures. Divine spent several days with the airy Marchetti, who ran off with Our Lady and led him astray, and almost murdered him, and whose ghost Our Lady did not always pass through without carrying off in his movements sparkling shreds, invisible to Darling and his great friend. Perhaps he wanted to say, "my good pal," and one day he said, "my pretty pal." He takes a cigarette, but it is Marchetti who, with a roguish flick, shoots it from the pack. Shreds of the Marchetti ghost cling all over Our Lady. They disguise him beyond recognition. These ghostly tatters do not become him. He really looks disguised, but only like poor little peasant lads at carnival time, with petticoats, shawls, wristlets, button boots, with Louis XV heels, sunbonnets, ficus stolen from the closets of grandmothers and sisters. Little by little, petal by petal, Our Lady of the Flowers plucks off his adventure. True or false? Both. With Marchetti, he robbed a safe that was hidden in an antique cabinet. As he cut the electric wire connecting it with a bell in the watchman's quarters, Marchetti, a 30-year-old handsome blonde Corsican, a Greco-Roman wrestling champion, put a finger to his lips and said, "Now it's quiet." Squatting probably on a rug, they sought the number and found it after having entangled themselves to the point of despair, in combinations which jumbled up their age, their hair, the smooth faces of their love, with multiples and submultiples. Finally, this diabolic tangle was organized into a rosette, and the door of the cabinet opened. They pocketed 300,000 francs and a treasure in fake jewels. In the car, on the way to Marseille, for even if one isn't thinking of leaving after that kind of job, one always goes to a port. Ports are at the end of the world. Marchetti For no other reason than nervousness struck Our Lady on the temple. His gold signet ring drew blood. Finally, Our Lady learned of it later through Marchetti's confessing it to a pal. Marchetti thought of bumping him off. In Marseille, after dividing the swag, Our Lady entrusted him with all of it, and Marchetti beat it, abandoning the child. He's a son of a bitch, Divine, ain't he? You were crazy about him, said Divine. Aw, go on, you're nuts. But Marchetti was handsome. Our Lady talks about the sweater that shows his figure like velvet. He feels that it envelopes the charm that subjugates, the iron hand and the velvet glove. Blonde Corsican, with eyes of blue. The wrestling was Greco-Roman, the signet ring of gold. On Our Lady's temple, the blood flowed. In short, he owed his life to one who, having just murdered him, resurrected him. Marchetti, by his grace, restored him to the world. Then, in the garret, Our Lady became sad and joyous. One might think he was singing a song of death to the air of a minuet. Divine listens. He is saying that if caught, Marchetti will be transported. He will be shipped off. Our Lady does not exactly know what transportation is, for all he has ever heard of it was a youngster once said to him in speaking of the courts, "Transportation's a rough deal, but he suspects that it will be frightful." For Divine, who is familiar with prisons and their pensive hosts, Marchetti is going to prepare himself in accordance with the rites, as she explains to Our Lady, perhaps as was done by a man condemned to death who, in one night, from twilight to dawn, sang all the songs he knew. Marchetti would sing songs with the voice of Tino Rossi. He will pack up, will pick the photos of his prettiest girlfriends, also his mother's, will kiss his mother in the visitor's room, will leave. Afterwards, it will be the sea, that is, the Devil's Isle, Negroes, rum distilleries, coconuts, colonials wearing Panamas, the beauty. Marchetti will play the beauty. He will be the beauty. I am touched at the thought of it, and could weep with tenderness over his handsome muscles submissive to the muscles of other brutes. The pimp, the lady killer, the hangman of hearts, will be queen of the labor gang. Of what use will his Greek muscles be? And he will be called Flash, until a younger hoodlum arrives. But no. And does God take pity on him? A decree no longer allows for the departure for Cayenne. The hardened offenders remain to the end of their days in the huge state prisons. The beauty's chance, his hope, has been abolished. They will die nostalgic for the homeland that is their true homeland, which they have never seen, and which is denied them. He is 30. Marchetti will remain between 4 white walls to the end of ends, and so as not to waste away with boredom, it will be his turn to elaborate these imaginary lives, never realized and without hope of ever being realized. It will be the death of hope. Well-to-do captives of a dice-shaped cell. I am very glad of it. Let this arrogant and handsome pimp in turn know the torments reserved for the weakly. We occupy our minds with giving ourselves splendid roles through luxurious lives. We invent so many that we remain enfeebled for the life of action. And if one of them came by chance to be realized, we would be unable to be happy in it, for we have exhausted the dry delights, and many a time recalled the memory of their illusion, of the 1,000 possibilities of glory and wealth. We are blasé. We are 40, 50, 60 years old. We know only petty vegetative misery. We are blasé. Your turn, Marchetti. Don't invent ways of making a fortune. Don't buy knowledge of a sure way of smuggling. Don't look for a new trick. They're all used up, more than used up. To fool jewelers, to rob whores, to bamboozle priests, to distribute phony identity cards. For if you don't have the heart to try to escape, resign yourself to the possibility of suddenly getting the right break, without specifying to yourself exactly what it might be. the one that gets you out of trouble forever. And enjoy it as you can, deep in yourself. For I hate you lovingly.